The convoy moved through the Colorado desert like a funeral procession. 3 armored vehicles, tinted windows, no markings. Inside the middle truck, shackled to a steel bench, sat a man whose name had once dominated headlines across America. His wrists were cuffed to a chain around his waist. His ankles were bound. A spit mask covered his face. He hadn't seen daylight in 48 hours. Outside, the landscape was barren. Red rocks stretched endlessly under a grey sky. In the distance, barely visible against the horizon, stood a structure that didn't belong. It looked less like a prison and more like a military bunker, low and sprawling, surrounded by layers of razor wire that gleamed like broken glass. No towers. No guards walking the perimeter. Just concrete, steel, and silence. This was ADX Florence, the most secure prison in the United States. The place where the government sends the men it wants the world to forget. The convoy slowed as it approached the outer gate. The man in the truck lifted his head slightly, eyes scanning what little he could see through the narrow window slit. He had heard stories. Everyone had. Inmates who went in and were never heard from again. Not dead, but erased. Buried alive in a tomb made of concrete and isolation. The gates opened with a mechanical groan. The trucks rolled forward, deeper into the complex. When they finally stopped, the back doors opened, and the man was pulled out by 4 guards in tactical gear. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their grip on his arms was firm, their movements efficient. This was routine for them. He was led through a series of steel doors, each one slamming shut behind him with a sound that echoed through the narrow corridors. The air inside was cold, sterile, and heavy with the smell of disinfectant. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, sickly glow. There were no windows. No natural light. Just endless grey walls and the distant sound of something metal scraping against concrete. They stopped in front of a cell. 7 feet by 12 feet. A concrete bed with a thin mattress. A steel toilet and sink combination bolted to the wall. A narrow window, 4 inches wide, placed too high to see anything but a sliver of sky. The door was solid steel with a small slot at the bottom for food trays. The guards removed his chains and shoved him inside. The door slammed shut. The slot clicked closed. And just like that, he was alone. Total isolation. 23 hours a day in this box. 1 hour for exercise in a slightly larger concrete cage. No human contact. No phone calls. No visitors except lawyers, and even those were conducted through reinforced glass with no physical proximity. Meals slid through the slot 3 times a day. The lights stayed on, controlled remotely, dimming only slightly at night. Sleep became a luxury. Time became meaningless. This was ADX Florence. The prison designed not just to contain dangerous men, but to break them. The man sat on the edge of the concrete bed and stared at the wall. He had committed crimes that shocked the nation. Acts so brutal that even hardened criminals recoiled at the details. He had expected punishment. He had expected to spend the rest of his life behind bars. But he hadn't expected this. This wasn't punishment. This was erasure. Days blurred into weeks. Weeks into months. The silence was the worst part. Not the absence of noise, but the presence of it. The hum of ventilation. The echo of his own breathing. The occasional distant scream from another cell, muffled and ghostly, a reminder that others were suffering the same fate. Some inmates talked to themselves just to hear a human voice. Some scratched messages into the walls with their fingernails. Some simply stopped moving. The staff at ADX Florence were trained to treat inmates as threats, not people. Every interaction was clinical. Guards communicated through intercoms. Doctors examined prisoners through video feeds. Mental health evaluations were rare and often dismissed. The official policy was security first, humanity second. Or maybe not at all. But the man in the cell wasn't just any inmate. His case had been different. His crimes had been different. And the way he had ended up here, in the most isolated corner of the most isolated prison in America, was different too. 3 months into his sentence, something strange began to happen. He started receiving letters. Not from family or friends. Those had stopped coming after the trial. These letters were different. Unsigned. Typed on plain paper. Delivered through official channels but with no return address. The content was cryptic. Fragments of information. Dates. Names. Locations. At first, he thought it was a prank. Some twisted game played by a guard or another inmate. But the details were too specific. Too accurate. One letter mentioned a warehouse in Detroit where evidence had been stored during his trial. Another referenced a witness who had testified against him, a woman whose testimony had been crucial to his conviction. The third letter contained a single sentence: "They lied to put you here. And they're still lying." He didn't know what to make of it. But it planted a seed. A question that began to grow in the silence of his cell. What if his conviction had been a setup? What if someone had wanted him in ADX Florence not because of what he had done, but because of what he knew? The man had been involved in organized crime for years. He had worked with people in high places. Politicians. Cops. Judges. He had dirt on powerful men, the kind of dirt that could destroy careers and topple empires. He had assumed that his arrest and conviction were the result of good police work. But now, locked in this concrete tomb, he began to wonder if it had been something else. A cleanup job. A way to silence him forever. He started paying closer attention to the routines around him. The guards who delivered his meals. The timing of cell checks. The patterns in the facility's daily operations. And he noticed something. Every Thursday, late at night, there was a shift change. For exactly 7 minutes, the surveillance cameras in his corridor went dark. He didn't know why. Maintenance, maybe. Or a blind spot in the system. But it was there. A crack in the armor. The next Thursday, he waited. When the lights dimmed and the cameras went silent, he pressed his ear against the door. Footsteps. Not the heavy boots of a guard. Something lighter. Quicker. They stopped outside his cell. The food slot opened. A hand reached through, not with a tray, but with a folded piece of paper. He grabbed it before the hand could pull away. The slot closed. The footsteps retreated. He unfolded the paper under the dim light. It was a map. A detailed layout of ADX Florence. Corridors. Security checkpoints. Guard stations. And a red line traced from his cell to a service tunnel on the far side of the facility. At the bottom of the map, a single sentence was written in small, precise letters. "They know you're figuring it out. You have less time than you think." His pulse quickened. Someone on the inside was helping him. But why? And who were they? The people who had framed him. The people who wanted him buried here forever. He didn't have answers. But he knew one thing for certain. If he stayed in this cell, he would die here. Not from violence. Not from illness. But from the slow, suffocating weight of isolation. His mind would fracture. His will would break. He would become another ghost in the concrete coffin of ADX Florence. He folded the map and tucked it into the narrow gap between his mattress and the bed frame. His hands were shaking. Not from fear. From something else. Something he hadn't felt in months. Hope. But when he lay back on the concrete bed and closed his eyes, a new thought crept into his mind. A darker one. What if this wasn't help? What if this was a trap? What if someone was leading him into a situation where they could eliminate him quietly, far from cameras and witnesses, and make it look like a suicide or an escape attempt gone wrong? He stared at the ceiling, his breathing shallow. The ventilation hummed. The lights flickered once, then steadied. Somewhere down the corridor, a door slammed shut. And in that moment, he realized something that chilled him to the bone. He wasn't sure which was worse. Staying in this cell and losing his mind. Or trusting the map and walking straight into a grave. The decision came faster than he expected. 3 days after receiving the map, another note arrived through the food slot. This time, the message was blunt. Tomorrow night. Be ready. Or be dead. He read it twice, then tore it into pieces smaller than confetti and flushed them down the steel toilet. His heart hammered against his ribs. Whoever was orchestrating this wasn't giving him time to think. That was intentional. Hesitation bred mistakes. Mistakes bred discovery. And discovery in ADX Florence meant years added to an already endless sentence, or worse, a convenient accident in the shower. The next day crawled by with excruciating slowness. Breakfast came and went. Lunch. Dinner. He barely touched the food. His mind was racing through scenarios, each one more dangerous than the last. He had no weapons. No allies he could see. No way to know if this was salvation or a bullet with his name on it. But he had made his choice. Staying meant dying slowly. Moving meant dying quickly. He'd take quick. At 10 p.m., the lights in his cell dimmed to their nighttime setting. He lay on his bunk, fully clothed, staring at the ceiling. His ears strained for any sound beyond the usual mechanical hum. Midnight came. Then 1 a.m. Nothing. At 1:47, he heard it. The faint click of the corridor cameras shutting down. Then footsteps. Light. Deliberate. They stopped outside his cell. The food slot opened. A voice, barely a whisper, slipped through. Stand at the back wall. Don't move. Don't speak. He did as instructed. His pulse thundered in his ears. From the slot, he heard the metallic scrape of something being inserted into the door mechanism. Electronic. Precise. 5 seconds later, the lock disengaged with a soft pneumatic hiss. The door swung open 6 inches. A figure stood in the dimly lit corridor. Medium height. Dark clothing. A maintenance uniform, the kind worn by the facility's contractors. A baseball cap pulled low. Surgical gloves. The face was obscured by shadows, but the eyes were sharp, alert, watching him with an intensity that made his skin crawl. Follow me. Exactly 3 steps behind. If I stop, you stop. If I run, you run. If I tell you to drop, you hit the ground. Understand? He nodded. Say it. I understand. The figure turned and moved down the corridor with practiced efficiency. He followed, his bare feet silent on the cold concrete. They passed cell after cell, each one sealed tight, each one holding another human being locked in the same suffocating isolation. No alarms. No shouts. Just the steady rhythm of their footsteps and the distant hum of the ventilation system. They reached a junction. The figure raised a hand. Stop. From somewhere ahead came voices. Guards on patrol. The figure pressed against the wall, motioning for him to do the same. They waited. 30 seconds. A minute. The voices faded. The figure moved again. They descended a stairwell, then another. The air grew colder. They were going down, deep into the infrastructure of the prison. Pipes lined the walls. Electrical conduits snaked overhead. This was the guts of ADX Florence, the maze of tunnels and access corridors that kept the facility running. Few inmates ever saw this place. Fewer still walked through it unchained. Finally, they stopped in front of a heavy steel door marked Authorized Personnel Only. The figure produced a keycard, swiped it, and the door clicked open. Inside was a small room filled with monitoring equipment. Screens displayed feeds from dozens of cameras throughout the prison. But half the screens were dark. Someone had disabled them. The figure closed the door behind them and finally spoke in a normal voice. It was a woman's voice. Calm. Professional. With an edge of urgency beneath the surface. Sit down. We don't have much time. He sat on a metal stool, his mind reeling. Who are you? She ignored the question. Instead, she pulled a tablet from a bag on the floor and turned it toward him. On the screen was a photograph. A crime scene. Yellow tape. Body bags. Forensic markers scattered across pavement slick with rain. He recognized it immediately. The warehouse in Detroit. The place where his final arrest had gone down. The place where, according to the prosecution, he had killed 2 federal informants execution style. You remember this, she said. It wasn't a question. Of course I remember it. It's why I'm here. No. Her voice was sharp. It's why they put you here. There's a difference. She swiped to the next image. A close-up of one of the bodies. The entry wound in the back of the head. The angle. The powder burns. She zoomed in further, highlighting details he had never seen during his trial. The ballistics report said the shots came from a 9mm Glock. Your weapon. Your prints on the grip. Open and shut, right? He said nothing. She swiped again. This time, the image was a forensic analysis. Trajectory angles. Bullet paths. Mathematical calculations overlaid on the crime scene photos. Except the angles wrong. The shooter was taller than you. 6'2", maybe 6'3". You're 5'10". The defense never caught it because the analysis was buried in a supplemental report that wasn't entered into evidence. Convenient. His mouth went dry. Who are you? Someone who knows you didn't pull that trigger. And someone who knows why they needed everyone to think you did. She pulled up another file. This one was a personnel record. FBI. Special Agent Marcus Delacroix. The lead investigator on his case. The man who had built the entire prosecution. The man who had testified under oath about the evidence, the timeline, the motive. Delacroix worked organized crime for 15 years, she continued. Clean record. Decorated. Respected. But 6 months before your arrest, he started making deposits into an offshore account. Small at first. 5,000 here. 10,000 there. By the time your trial ended, he'd moved over $2 million through a network of shell companies. He was dirty. He was bought. By people you used to work for. People who needed you gone because you knew too much. You weren't just a criminal to them. You were a liability. So they paid Delacroix to frame you, bury you in ADX Florence where you'd never talk, and make sure the real killer walked free. The room seemed to tilt. He gripped the edge of the stool to steady himself. Why are you telling me this? Because Delacroix isn't the only one. There's a network. Cops, prosecutors, judges. People who've been paid to manipulate cases, bury evidence, put away targets who threaten the wrong people. You're not the first. You won't be the last. But you're the one I can prove. She handed him the tablet. These files are encrypted. Copies of every transaction, every communication, every piece of evidence that ties Delacroix and his partners to the conspiracy. I need you to get this information to someone on the outside. Someone who can't be bought. Why me? You could have leaked this yourself. Because I'm already dead. The words hung in the air like a physical weight. She pulled off the baseball cap. Dark hair, cropped short. A scar running along her jawline. Her face was lean, hard, the face of someone who had seen too much and survived too long on adrenaline and paranoia. My name is Diane Archer. I was DE. Undercover. I spent 3 years inside a cartel collecting intelligence. When I tried to hand it over, I found out my handler was on Delacroix's payroll. He tried to have me killed. I survived. Barely. I've been running ever since. Hiding. Digging. Trying to expose them before they find me. So you broke into a Supermax prison to recruit a convicted killer. I broke into a Supermax prison to recruit the only man with a motive strong enough to see this through. You want out of here. I can give you that. But only if you help me burn these bastards to the ground. He stared at the tablet, then at her. How do I know you're not lying? How do I know this isn't some elaborate setup? She leaned in close, her eyes locked on his. Because if I wanted you dead, you'd already be dead. And because in about 90 seconds, the cameras are coming back online. So you can either trust me and walk out of here, or you can go back to your cell and rot. He looked at the screens. Several were flickering. The system was rebooting. She was right. Time was up. What's the plan? She handed him a maintenance uniform identical to hers. Put this on. Fast. He stripped off his prison jumpsuit and pulled on the uniform. She handed him a fake ID badge, a set of keys, and a small earpiece. We're walking out the service exit on the east side. It's unmanned for the next 12 minutes during shift change. After that, we're gone. There's a car waiting 2 miles down the access road. Once we're clear, you disappear. New identity. New life. But first, you deliver these files. To who? A journalist. Rebecca Holt. Investigative reporter. She's been sniffing around Delacroix for months but doesn't have enough to publish. These files will give her everything. She opened the door. The corridor was empty. They moved quickly, retracing their steps through the maze of tunnels. His mind was spinning. Freedom was minutes away. But so was disaster. One wrong turn. One guard in the wrong place. One camera coming online too soon. And it was over. They climbed the stairs. Passed through another checkpoint. The exit was ahead. A red door with a crash bar. Diane reached for it. Her hand was inches from the bar when a voice crackled over the intercom. Lockdown. All personnel report. We have a breach in cell block H. Diane's eyes widened. She grabbed his arm. Run. They slammed through the door into the cold Colorado night. Alarms erupted behind them, wailing like dying animals. Spotlights snapped on, sweeping the compound. Diane sprinted toward the outer fence, pulling a small device from her pocket. She threw it at the base of the chain link. It exploded with a sharp crack, blowing a hole just large enough to crawl through. They dove through. Razor wire tore at his uniform. Blood ran down his arm. He didn't care. They were outside. They were running. Behind them, dogs barked. Voices shouted. Engines roared to life. Diane led him across open ground toward a cluster of rocks. They scrambled into the shadows just as a searchlight swept over the spot where they'd been standing. She pressed a finger to her lips. Silent. They waited. A helicopter passed overhead, rotors chopping the air. Then another. The prison was mobilizing everything. Diane pulled out a phone and typed rapidly. 30 seconds later, headlights appeared in the distance. A car. Moving fast. It skidded to a stop 20 feet away. Diane grabbed him and they ran for it. The back door flew open. They threw themselves inside. The driver didn't speak. Didn't look back. Just punched the accelerator and tore off into the desert. As the prison shrank behind them, Diane handed him the tablet. Don't lose this. It's the only copy. He gripped it like a lifeline. But as the adrenaline began to fade, a new thought crept in. Cold. The safe house was a rotting single-story in the outskirts of Pueblo, Colorado. Peeling paint. Boarded windows. The kind of place even squatters avoided. Inside, the air smelled of mildew and old cigarettes. Diane locked the door behind them and swept the rooms with a handheld scanner, checking for bugs, cameras, anything that might give them away. Clean. The driver who'd picked them up was gone, disappearing into the night without a word. No names. No questions. That was how it worked in Diane's world. Trust was a currency you spent carefully, and only when you had no other choice. He sat at a rickety table in what used to be the kitchen, the tablet glowing in front of him. Files upon files. Bank transfers. Encrypted emails. Surveillance photos. Audio recordings. Years of corruption laid bare in digital format. Enough to destroy careers. Enough to spark federal investigations. Enough to get them both killed 100 times over. Diane paced near the window, peering through a gap in the boards. We need to move at first light. This place is compromised the second anyone figures out we're in Pueblo. How long do we have? Hours. Maybe less. Depends on how fast they connect the dots. She turned to face him. Delacroix has resources. Private contractors. Ex-military. People who make problems disappear. Once he knows you're out, he'll activate every asset he has. And he'll know by now. Then why wait until morning? Why not go straight to this journalist? Because Rebecca Holt is under surveillance. Has been for weeks. If we show up on her doorstep tonight, we lead them right to her. She's in Denver. We need to approach carefully. Somewhere public. Somewhere they can't make a move without witnesses. He scrolled through the files again, stopping on a photograph. Delacroix shaking hands with a man in an expensive suit. The caption identified him as Senator Graham Yates. Budget Committee. Oversight on federal law enforcement. One of the most powerful men in Washington. Yates is involved. Diane nodded grimly. Up to his neck. He's been funneling money to Delacroix's operation for years. In exchange, Delacroix makes sure certain investigations never go anywhere. Certain people never testify. It's a protection racket dressed up as justice. How did you even get all this? I didn't. Not all of it. She sat down across from him, exhaustion creeping into her features. Most of it came from someone else. Someone inside the FBI who saw what was happening and couldn't live with it anymore. He reached out to me 6 months ago. Started feeding me documents. Then 3 weeks ago, he stopped responding. I found out later he'd been killed in a car accident. Single vehicle collision. No witnesses. Ruled accidental. But it wasn't. No, it wasn't. Her jaw tightened. They murdered him. And they'll murder us if we give them the chance. He closed the tablet and leaned back. His body ached. The cut on his arm from the razor wire throbbed. He hadn't slept in over 30 hours. But sleep felt like a luxury he couldn't afford. Not yet. Why Rebecca Holt? What makes her different? She's already burned by the system. 5 years ago, she published a story exposing corruption in the Chicago PD, lost her job. Got blacklisted. Death threats. Her editor threw her under the bus to protect the paper. She's been freelance ever since, chasing stories nobody else will touch. She has nothing to lose. That makes her dangerous to people like Delacroix. And you trust her? I trust that she wants the truth more than she wants to stay safe. That's enough. They sat in silence for a moment. Outside, the wind rattled the boards. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. The night pressed in around them, heavy and oppressive. Then Diane's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen. Her face went pale. What? She turned the phone toward him. A news alert. Breaking story. Massive manhunt underway for escaped inmate from ADX Florence. Considered armed and extremely dangerous. Photos included. His mugshot. Diane's face, reconstructed from an old DEA ID photo. They're already spinning it, she said quietly. Making you the monster. Making me the rogue agent. By morning, every cop in the state will be looking for us. He felt the walls closing in. We're not going to make it to Denver. Yes, we are. Her voice was steel. We just have to be smarter. She pulled a laptop from a duffel bag in the corner and booted it up. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Within minutes, she'd hacked into a local traffic camera network. Feeds from highways. Intersections. Gas stations. All displayed in a grid on the screen. They'll be setting up roadblocks. Checkpoints. We can't take the main roads. But there are back routes. Logging roads. Service trails. I've mapped them out. If we move carefully, we can stay off their radar. And if we don't? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. At 4 a.m., they left the safe house. Diane had stolen a rusted pickup truck from a nearby farm, hot-wiring it in under 2 minutes. They drove without headlights until they were miles from Pueblo, navigating by moonlight and memory. The roads were empty. Silent. The kind of silence that screamed danger. 2 hours later, as dawn broke over the Rockies, they reached the outskirts of Denver. Diane parked the truck in a public lot near Union Station. Crowds. Commuters. Tourists. Witnesses everywhere. Exactly what they needed. Rebecca will be at the coffee shop on 17th Street, Diane said, checking her watch. She goes there every morning at 8. We have 30 minutes. They blended into the crowd, pulling on sunglasses and hats. He kept his head down, hyper-aware of every face, every camera, every cop walking a beat. His heart hammered. One wrong look. One moment of recognition. And it was over. The coffee shop was small, packed with morning regulars. Diane spotted Rebecca immediately. Mid-40s. Sharp eyes. Wearing a faded jacket and jeans. She sat alone near the back, nursing a black coffee and scrolling through her phone. Diane approached first. He hung back near the entrance, watching the street. Diane slid into the seat across from Rebecca. The journalist looked up, startled. Then recognition flickered across her face. She started to stand. Diane grabbed her wrist. "Don't. Just listen." Rebecca froze. Her eyes darted to him, then back to Diane. "You're Diane Archer. You're all over the news. They're saying you broke a murderer out of ADX Florence. They're lying. Just like they lied about him. Just like they've been lying about everything." Diane slid the tablet across the table. "Everything you need is on here. Delacroix, Yates, the whole network. Proof. Real proof. Publish it." Rebecca stared at the tablet like it was a live grenade. "You're asking me to commit career suicide. Again. I'm asking you to do your job. Expose them. Before they bury more people. Why should I trust you? Because in about 5 minutes, federal agents are going to walk through that door and arrest us. Maybe kill us. And if you don't take this tablet and run, they'll take it from you too. And all of this, everything we've risked, will be for nothing." Rebecca's hand hovered over the tablet. Her jaw tightened. Then she grabbed it and shoved it into her bag. "If this is fake, if you're playing me." "It's not. You'll see." Diane stood. He moved toward the door. Rebecca called after them. "Wait. Where will you go?" Diane looked back. A sad smile crossed her face. "Nowhere good." They stepped outside. The morning sun was bright, almost blinding. Traffic hummed. People walked past, oblivious. For a moment, it felt almost normal. Then he saw them. Black SUVs. 3 of them. Pulling up to the curb. Doors opening. Men in tactical gear pouring out. Delacroix stepped out of the lead vehicle, his face a mask of cold fury. Diane grabbed his arm. "Run." They bolted down the street. Shouts erupted behind them. Pedestrians scattered. A gunshot cracked through the air. Then another. He didn't look back. Didn't think. Just ran. They cut through an alley. Vaulted a fence. Emerged onto another street. A car screeched to a halt, nearly hitting them. The driver cursed. They kept running. His lungs burned. His legs screamed. But adrenaline pushed him forward. Diane ducked into an abandoned building. He followed. They sprinted up a stairwell, floors blurring past. Footsteps thundered below them. Close. Too close. They reached the roof. Nowhere left to go. Diane turned, pulling a gun from her jacket. She aimed it at the stairwell door. "Get back." He pressed against the wall. The door burst open. Delacroix stepped through, flanked by 2 contractors. Their weapons were raised. "It's over, Diane," Delacroix said calmly. "Put the gun down. You killed him. Your own partner. Because he wanted to do the right thing. He was weak. Weak people get people killed. No. People like you get people killed." Delacroix smiled. "Rebecca Holt won't publish that story. We'll make sure of it. And you'll disappear. Officially listed as killed resisting arrest. Another tragic end to a troubled agent." Diane's finger tightened on the trigger. "Maybe. But you're coming with me." The gunshot was deafening. Delacroix stumbled back, clutching his shoulder. The contractors opened fire. Diane shoved him toward the edge of the roof. "Jump." "What?" "There's a dumpster. We'll survive. Jump." He looked over the edge. 3 stories down. A rusted dumpster half filled with trash bags. Insane. Suicidal. He jumped. The impact drove the air from his lungs. Pain exploded through his body. He rolled out, gasping. Diane landed beside him a second later. They stumbled to their feet and ran. Sirens wailed in the distance. News helicopters circled overhead. The city was in chaos. 2 blocks away, Diane collapsed against a wall, blood seeping through her jacket. She'd been hit. "Go," she gasped. "Get out of here. I'm not leaving you. You have to. Rebecca has the files. She'll publish. But only if you're not caught. Only if there's someone left to corroborate the story. Go." He hesitated. Then nodded. He disappeared into the crowd, just another face in the chaos. 3 months later, Rebecca Holt's article went viral. Front page of every major outlet. Delacroix arrested. Senator Yates indicted. The network crumbled. Dozens of convictions overturned. Including his. He walked out of a federal courthouse a free man. Cameras flashed. Reporters shouted questions. He ignored them all. That night, alone in a hotel room, he watched the news. They were calling it the biggest corruption scandal in decades. Diane Archer was being hailed as a hero. Posthumously. She'd died on that rooftop. Bled out before the paramedics arrived. He turned off the TV. Pulled out a small photograph he'd kept hidden all these months. Diane, smiling, taken from her old DA file. He set it on the nightstand. Closed his eyes. Freedom tasted like ash. But the truth had won. And somewhere, he hoped, that was enough. Outside, the city continued on, unaware that the ghosts of ADX Florence still walked among them, carrying secrets too heavy to ever truly escape.